keys for this thing. It's really, this has actually turned into a fireside chat, hasn't it? This is okay. You guys ready? Do this? You ready? I'm a wreck. I can't do that. No, we're good. Hi, everybody. Excellent. Welcome. Thank you all for coming out this evening or this afternoon. It is really such a great pleasure to welcome you to our inaugural Amplifying Voices Distinguished Lecture Series. And I am just absolutely thrilled to be able to bring together a leading ambassador for the diversity in science and technology, engineering and mathematics. In other words, all of STEM. Dr. Raven Baxter is here with us today. Yeah, let's give it. She deserves it. Come on. She deserves it. Right? Thank you. So my name is Craig Arnold. I am Princeton's Vice Dean for Innovation in the Office of the Dean for Research here. And I'm also Susan Dodd-Brown Professor of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering and Material Science. And the Office for the Dean for Research created the lecture series, and we're hosting Dr. Baxter's visit along with our co-hosts, the Graduate School, the Office of the Provost, I think they're listed up here, and the Office for the Dean of the Faculty. Now, obviously it took a lot of people to put all of this together, but I really, need to acknowledge the Dean for Research, Pablo Di Benedetti, who really spearheaded much of this. And he very much would like to be giving these remarks. Unfortunately, due to some university policies and a recent COVID test, it's not practical for him to be giving these remarks, but he does send his warm regards and these words of welcome that I will be presenting to you. So this is actually the first time that we're gathered under this new lecture series. And this is aiming to bring to Princeton really prominent and inspirational figures to address the ways that we can enhance underrepresented voices in research, in innovation, and in entrepreneurship. And this program we designed in response to a call from Princeton University President Christopher Eisgruber to find ways that we can enhance opportunities for all communities, including the ones that have traditionally been underrepresented here on our campus and beyond. And we want to engage in a common journey of teaching, of learning, of discovery, and of innovation. Now, this Amplifying Voices lecture series brings inspirational figures to campus for both a public lecture as well as to meet some of our Princeton community, in particular some of our graduate students and postdoctoral researchers. Some of you are in the room right now, and in small groups. So we really have a chance to build those types of networks and those mentoring opportunities that would benefit everyone involved. Now, in fact, the speakers in this series are chosen by the students and postdoctoral researchers themselves. So we have no idea, no influence over it, which is really great. Dr. Baxter was chosen through a nomination and voting process that we conducted in the fall of 2021. And we asked the graduate students and postdocs in the natural sciences to nominate inspirational people that they would like to invite to campus. And Dr. Baxter was way at the top of the list there. And so I am absolutely thrilled again to introduce Dr. Raven Baxter, who many of you know by her social media handle, Raven the Science Maven. Now, before I pass it over, I do still have to introduce her, but before that, I will say that Dr. Baxter is not just going to be giving a lecture or anything like that. She's not going to put us to sleep or anything, but she's going to be having a conversation with Sean Maxim. Sean's the Associate Provost for Diversity and Inclusion here at Princeton, And in that role, he leads strategic partnerships and projects associated with campus climate, academic departments, data analysis, among many other things that he does. And one of them is a distinguished conversation leader, as we will find out. But he has some really good material to work with. Dr. Baxter is an internationally acclaimed educator. She's a molecular biologist. She's a music artist. She's a science communicator. She has a magnetic personality. I'm being drawn in this direction just as I'm speaking here. And she really challenges the status quo to prove that science communicators are not all one and the same. She has earned numerous awards for her achievements, including most recently the STEM Trailblazer Award on Ebony's 2022 Power 100 list for her innovative and inspirational work in STEM. She's earned a Forbes 30 Under 30, an American Association of University Women's Women of Distinction Award, and Fortune Magazine's 40 Under 40, among being sought after as a public speaker at universities, at national science teaching associations, even on the STARZ network, I believe. And you can often see her collaborating with folks at NASA, featured in the Washington Post, among other media outlets, for her work in STEM advocacy. Dr. Baxter's interest in STEM comes from her curiosity to explore the world around her from a very young age, an interest that developed into this lifelong affinity for science, as we're going to hear about in a little bit. She's translated that curiosity into the creation of popular viral hip-hop videos to teach science lessons to social media audiences and to disrupt traditional culture perceptions about scientists. And she was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. She has a PhD in science education from the University of Buffalo in New York, as well as a master's degree in cellular and molecular biology. And she has a bachelor's degree in science in biology, both from Buffalo State. Once again, we are honored and thrilled to have Dr. Baxter here as our inaugural Amplifying Voices Distinguished Lecturer. And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Baxter officially. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out, and I am now going to pass it over to Sean. Please take it away.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Craig. And thanks to Pablo and everyone, Catherine, everybody who worked so hard to make this visit possible. So we're going to talk like y'all aren't here, right? So it's going to be like two friends having a conversation. So, you know, we want to make this sort of feel really intimate. And I think a lot of you are familiar with how awesome Dr. Baxter is, both through all of the things she's done. But, you know, we really are grateful for her insight and wisdom being brought to our campus. So can I ask you, Dr. Baxter, to reflect on these three words: researcher, innovator, and entrepreneur? What did that look like when you were growing up? And did you have any science role models or mentors who you related to?
Wow. Well, first, I'd like to take this opportunity before we get started to thank everyone involved in the process of bringing me here, especially to the graduate students and postdocs who nominated me to be here. It's quite an honor. And I am also excited to meet you in person. And yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation, so thank you. Researcher, innovator, and entrepreneur. And my science role models. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to say that my first role model in science communication, at least, was Al Roker, the weatherman on the Today Show, right? And I think I consider him a science communicator, right? Whether we realize it or not, talking about the weather, talking about changing temperatures, atmospheric conditions, climate, is science, but he made it into something that you did not want to miss every morning. You know, when he was on TV, you were going to get good feelings. He was going to tell you the weather, and then he was going to say, here's what's happening in your neck of the woods, right? And then it would go to your local news station, and I was excited. And I think, you know, innovating feelings, innovating an experience for people that you're talking to is important. And I think sharing science is important, but also the feeling that you can spread about learning science is equally as important. And I don't think that those three terms are mutually exclusive. I think that you can occupy many arenas. You can pull together all of your skills and talents to make your career what you'd like it to be. And for me, I've been a researcher, I am an entrepreneur, and I like to think I'm an innovator as well. And I don't think that I could not be those three things today.
Awesome. I'm a huge Al Roker fan, and I'm happy he's finally getting the love he deserves. So a follow-up question is, what were some formative experiences you had in your early years that really influenced your decision to study science? Were there family members, other kind of mentors who influenced you to choose science?
Honestly, I always had a natural inclination to science, and there was never a point in my life where I had to consider science because it just seemed to be ever present. When I was a kid, I was just asking questions about why is the sky blue? Why is fire red or white or blue? And those natural questions about the world. And my mother is not a scientist, so when I came to her with these questions, she'd say, "Go read a book, go online, go use the internet, go answer these questions yourself." Little did she know she was instilling those research habits in me. And then I realized that even when I found the answers, there were then more questions. Once I figured out why is the sky blue, okay, well now we have to learn about why are light particles scattering, and going down these rabbit holes. So for me, science is very much an adventure. And once I figured out that I could make an adventure a career, being a scientist was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I really love how your experiences of curiosity and sort of being curious and driven to issues of discovery part of your journey. And the thing I think that's most interesting about the work you're doing is showing people that curiosity is a natural aspect of science, right? So really important. So during your time as a sort of student and early career academic, what were the key factors that you found helpful to you as you sort of navigated STEM spaces? What would you say were the kind of supportive or useful aspects of mentors and other making the environment such that it was supportive to you?
That's a great question, because I think a lot of people have a notion that I had a mentor that was with me throughout this whole thing, but the truth is that I really had to forge my own way for the most part. What was helpful for me, even though I didn't have direct mentorship in STEM, were the people actually outside of STEM, in the social sciences, and even people who weren't in academia, people who were just, rooting for me and instilling that confidence in me so that whatever room I did walk into, I felt like I could own my space authentically and not feel so challenged by these external pressures to conform to, what does society want me to show up as? Once I became comfortable with myself as an individual, that made it so easy for me to navigate STEM fields, even throughout the adversity. Self-awareness and social awareness really was a muscle that I had to keep flexing until really, and throughout my professional career as well. But it all started, I think, with my community and the people around me.
Yeah, you often talk a lot about, ensuring that people could be their unapologetic selves, et cetera. And so it sounds like there were just having a sort of village of people who were outside of your discipline, outside of the things you were studying were really, really important. Was there one of these moments, and we're big on moments, and life is made up of multiple moments, but is there an experience that you had that were that you reflect back on and was this was a teachable moment for me to be able to be authentic?
Oh, yes. And I think one that I like to share is a story about my first research symposium. So I did not do research until I was late in my undergraduate career. And I ended up doing a soil ecology project, which was not even my field. But I really wanted to have a research opportunity. And so I was conducting research over the course of my senior year of college. And at the end of the year, my research supervisor said, "Raven, I want you to present your work at a symposium." And he and we weren't like very well acquainted, so he didn't understand that I had never been to a research symposium. I didn't know a clue what he was talking about, but I've done like, fifth grade science fairs, and like I knew what that was. And so he said, well, make a poster, and then go to this conference, and you're going to put your poster up, and people are going to come and talk to you. And so he gave me no other instructions other than make a poster about your research. And so I went to Michael's, the craft store, and I got a hot pink poster board. I got glitter. I got pipe cleaners, feathers, rhinestones, like scrapbook paper. And I brought all of that to my dorm room and made the gaudiest, just flashy poster you've ever seen. And so I brought it to my advisor the day before the poster conference because he wanted to review it with me and, make sure everything was right. And the face he made when I unrolled the poster was one I'll never forget. I mean, if he practically unhinged his jaw to drop to the floor. And he said, "What is that?" I said, "Well, this is my poster. Is something wrong?" And he says, "Raven, I wanted you to make something like this." And he points to, the traditional Times New Roman grocery store receipt looking paper on the wall. And he says, I just don't feel comfortable with you bringing what you made to the conference. And so he told me I had two options. One was to go and hurry up and make a PowerPoint version of my poster and hurry up and get to the printing office to have it printed in time for tomorrow. And then the second option was that I don't go to the conference. And so I was faced with the decision, being junior, in my research career, and obviously my advisor is more aware of things in the academic space than I was. I really was faced with the decision of, do I respect my mentor or like my supervisor, or do I do what I want to do? Like, do I remain authentic to myself? And so my conclusion was that no matter how my poster was presented, the rigor of my work was still the same, the quality was still the same, my results, conclusions were still identical. So I took the poster to the conference because I didn't want to change it. And this is when I learned the value of being authentic in STEM spaces. I took the poster to the conference, and people were lining up to talk to me about my research. But not just people in the sciences, it was the dance majors, the business majors, the phys ed majors lining up to talk to me about soil microbial respiration.
It's very interesting, actually.
It is very interesting. But one of the comments, or some of the comments I was getting was, I didn't know you could talk about science this way. How can I change my major to science? Can I do a biology minor? And just me showing up and showing my science authentically in the way that I decided to show up was inspirational enough to make someone want to pursue a science career. And so I learned, it's the little things that we do that can make a huge difference in how other people perceive science and scientists. And I decided from that point that I was only going to show up authentically because I knew how important it is to other people, whether I'm aware of it or not.
No, I think that's a very powerful story, and kind of is like an inflection point. And it also shows you how, for your advisor, there was a lot of assumptions made about new, right? We talk often about the hidden curriculum, right? And so it was only telling you what you can't do is where you sort of learn something. So I think that's really powerful. So when did you come to the realization that communicating about science is important?
I think not only that experience, but just realizing that I had a lot of instructors and educators who weren't really educating. They were more so there to do research. And I started noting, like, to do science is to be in search of facts, right? And but my thought process became, what is fact without meaning? What is fact without understanding or connection? And what is a scientific career? And what does it mean to produce facts when the people around you can't interpret them or don't understand, and it doesn't mean anything to them? So it became important to me to bridge that gap between the facts and the knowledge, and making sure that we are, as a community, creating inclusive, comprehensive science messaging and communication.
Yeah, and I think to that point, right, I think the last couple of years during the pandemic, we have seen how important communicating about science, connecting to meaning is so critical. And so, yeah, I think we've all had a sort of real world experiment and experience in that, the criticality of that. So continuing that sort of thread, given your expertise, and here our key mission at Princeton is truth-seeking, can you share your thoughts on the importance of universities and STEM disciplines sort of taking responsibility to communicate that STEM spaces are accessible to the broadest range of talent?
I think it's one thing to send messaging, but I think that there also needs to be actions and like a true concerted effort to support that messaging. I've been hearing from the students that I've spoken with today that they're looking for opportunities, and there are opportunities here for them to be involved in the transformative changes that need to occur to make science more inclusive and more diverse. And I think that every university really should be, at the very least, listening to the students to see what they want and what they see in their communities, and how they can be a part of the change. And so, I think that for universities, the students really, I'm a student-centered person and educator, so I'm always going to say, let's listen to the students, let's give the students a voice, and then go from there, because we wouldn't be anywhere without the students.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about new ideas, new perspectives, broadening the range of ideas that are allowed and venerated. So, to continue to be excellent is actually critical, that makes sure talent from everywhere can thrive. Part of that is having a voice in decision making. So I hear you on that. So, I think often you talk a lot about your sort of own experiences, and sometimes how they might have been racialized or gendered experiences, and sometimes just bad mentoring or bad non-inclusive environments. So can you talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges you faced as a Black woman and a person underrepresented in scientific research?
Well, I think that it's been an interesting experience, being really comfortable with myself very early on in my academic career, and owning that throughout my entire career, and kind of watching people be uncomfortable. Because showing up authentically or not being able to show up authentically has been a barrier for people like me for a very long time. And I think I'm motivated to break that barrier and model what that can look like. But I think the challenges for me have been what people do when they're uncomfortable about you showing up authentically. And even though you're not crossing a boundary, you're not being disrespectful, but you're challenging their mindset and their perception of their reality, making people uncomfortable has been like both a joy and a pain for me. And yeah, I think that's just been the biggest challenge for me. But I think out of discomfort can come growth, mm-hmm. and learning opportunities and opportunities for conversation. And hopefully our end goal is to diversify and help shift the perception of what our science community can look like.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting because oftentimes for the people who are encountering a new way of doing things or a new way of a communication or a new learning style or whatever, they're sort of either their incongruence or discomfort gets activated, but they don't even know that they're uncomfortable.
Right.
Right? You as a person in the interaction could tell there's some discomfort, but also the other thing is like oftentimes is depending on who the person is, right? They are fine being authentic, right? They're often very authentic. It's just like they're not comfortable with you being authentic. So have you had interactions with people where you could sort of point that out in a subtle way, or has it always been people being sort of defensive or ignorant?
That's a really good question. I don't even know how I can express. I know what you're saying, though. It's just hard for me to pinpoint an exact moment. But I share that experience. Do you have a moment?
Yeah, I say I just tell people, oh, it's interesting. It's interesting that the fact that I'm doing this, it creates some kind of unease, right? So it's less about making any kind of accusations about people and more like pointing out, servicing something. And then I think also when you point out opportunities where something that's not the norm causes people to be sort of uncomfortable, right? So a beautiful example is currently now Rosh Hashanah is happening, right? And so if we make acknowledgments to the fact that some high holy days are happening, and if you're uncomfortable with that, you should also understand that for a lot of Christian holidays, which are high holy days, we acknowledge them freely and openly, right? So it's just about pointing out where sometimes there's sort of disparities in terms of what we accept as normative. As one way I do that.
Powerful.
It's not a good strategy, but I try.
No, I think that's great.
So you've given a lot of sort of nuggets and wisdom of our sort of aspirations and where we hope to be. So because you have a crystal ball. Looking forward, what is your hope for science and STEM fields in the USA 10 years from now? What are some commitments and work you would like to see labs and universities doing to implementing us to get to where we need to be to solve some of these grand challenges?
Yes. I think that we have a lot of conversations about getting people into STEM. Like, we got to see more women in STEM. I want to see more marginalized groups, in STEM, moving from being underrepresented to equally represented. And I honestly want to hear more about getting people into leadership in STEM. I think that the more diversity that we can have in leadership, the bigger impacts that we can have. I can't tell you how many times I've met with organizations that are, bringing me in to talk about diversity, and I have meetings with their C-suite, and it's monochromatic, and they're all men, and they're like, "Well, what can we do to diversify?" I'm like, "Look at this room. What's going on here? Look at what's going on." If we're really wanting our efforts to serve the diversity of this world, we have to make sure the leaders of these efforts can represent the diversity of this world. It makes sense, right? And another thing is, when I did work in industry, there were tons of women in the lab. Actually, it was almost all women at the bench doing research and working, but the senior scientist, again, men, and monochromatic. So it was, when I hear we need more women in STEM, I'm like, well, it would have been nice to have a senior scientist, who wasn't a man. What would our research have looked like if we had diversity there? I'm really just curious to see the changes that can be made in leadership and how that's going to impact. I feel like it's going to have a ripple across science as a whole. And I think it's possible. I just have to get people kind of out of their comfort zone and change that image of what does leadership look like. It can look like anyone, anything.
No, I think that's a great example of something we can do and some commitments that we can make in the here and now. So I really appreciate that. So can you talk to us about what drew you specifically to the study of education science, and what advice would you have for scientists who want to go beyond their lab work to share science through videos, social media, creating art? It's not going to be as good as yours, but people should still get some practice or tools they can use to make their research and teaching more accessible to all.
Gosh. Yes, so the pivot from molecular biology to science education and the education field as a whole was, to this day, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Because my brain, my thought process, everything was just being challenged and flipped on its head. Because the first thing that we learn is we're allowed to include ourselves and our identities in our research. And you don't do that in molecular biology. I'm talking about proteins folding. Like, what does my narrative have to do with this? But in the education program, I learned about the importance of our personal narratives and how to connect that to research, to science. I also learned about how to talk about science to people with different worldviews than I did. We talked about indigenous science and the actual nature of what is science and how is science perceived by different cultures across the world, people of different socioeconomic backgrounds. I mean, I even took neurobiology classes because we weren't just thinking about educational psychology, but also like how does the brain actually work and how do we retain knowledge and information. And once I acquired all of that information and I realized, wow, even though I have a master's in molecular bio and I've worked in industry and I've done all this research, I really truly did not actually know how to communicate science until I invested that time to research education, educational strategies. And I honestly feel like every scientist should have some level of that training in the education space. I truly think that it makes me a better scientist if I was doing research. I think that it only enhances my ability to conduct science and more so my ability to collaborate with other researchers and also communicate science. And so I think, for aspiring science communicators, I would say try to get some formal training if you can. I know that there are programs across the country like the Allen Alda Center for Science Communication, and there's tons of them around now. But try to get some formal training under your belt, and I think that's a good way to go. I would love to see more opportunities, formal opportunities for graduate students and even undergraduates to get into science communication.
Yeah, no, I think you're the sort of thinking about questions of what is knowledge, epistemology,
right,
are important. The understanding how do we communicate across difference, value systems, viewpoints, but even, in a practical sense, right? If you think about ensuring that sponsored research can continue, to ensuring that some of the changes around that we want to implement around policy related to climate change, we have to be able to communicate that, right? So there's both important reasons around just broadening the amount of the global talent, but also the practicality of it. So I really appreciate that. So I'm going to pivot to some questions that were asked in advance by the audience, and then we'll also take some in the room, I believe. So voices have been amplified over a long period of time, and unfortunately, the needs and demands of these voices are not met. In your opinion, do you think the world is ready to listen? What do you think can be done to help people who are speaking but cannot be heard? Hot.
Wow. People who are speaking but can't be heard, I think it really goes back to building community, because you need support. We were talking about this in one of the faculty sessions today, I believe. I feel like as a community, we have a responsibility to uplift each other and make sure that if there's a gap, we work together to fill it. And if there's a voice that needs to be amplified, we work together to make that happen. And I just think it all ties to that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think community and coalition. So all the people I admire who have done powerful things in the world. Well, first, science doesn't happen alone. Like
Right.
nobody does it by themselves. But also any kind of positive systemic or structural change happens in community, right, and coalition. So part of it is the building trust and building community, because none of us can solve these grand challenges alone. We all live on the planet together, right? So it's all thinking about an ethos of community are critical. Now we just need to give people the strategy to build community. I think
Right.
that's the part. And I think people are good at building community sometimes when the community is monochromatic, right? When the community has differences, it takes a little bit more intentionality to build and sustain community. So.
I agree.
So this one, the person says, "Thank you for coming," 16 exclamation points. So, then, yeah. So what are your strategies for dealing with negativity on social media? I'm a climate scientist and a young woman of color, and I'd love to use my voice more, but I don't feel equipped to handle the anti-science trolls who are everywhere, or personal attacks that I see other women and climate dealing with, especially on Twitter.
It's a great question, because Twitter can be very challenging to exist on. It's the most challenging platform to exist on, honestly. I don't know how I've had so much success on there, but I think that there's going to be haters, there's going to be trolls and people who are going to disagree. My rule has always been that I don't return that energy, and I don't take it personally when that happens, and I do take it as an opportunity to challenge myself to practice, like use best practices in science communication. So if someone is trying to disagree with me, and people get on me all the time about this, they're like, "How could you be so nice? You're so rude," but I don't have to be rude back. I like to challenge people and say, "Okay, we disagree. Let's talk about it." And I think that throws people for a loop. But removing some of the emotion from these interactions and really sticking to what is the message, how do I want to represent myself in this space, can really take, it could go a long way. And my block list online is very long. So don't get me wrong, like I will block someone, but I also allow people opportunities to just represent their standpoint, and I try to role model healthy communication in science.
I think that's really important. And so part of what you're saying is you're fine with people disagreeing, right? It has to be respectful. If you can't do it respectfully, then you get blocked. I mean, I think that's appropriate,
Right. And I think sometimes we have to kind of take a step back and say, maybe I don't need to come into this conversation with the goal of persuading this person that I'm right. Maybe my goal is to just build trust, right? A lot of things can't be done in one conversation. I can't tell you how many conversations about COVID vaccinations I've had with one person where the first conversation was just like, "Okay, I know you're hesitant. Just tell me how you feel." And listening, and me not coming in there and saying, this is why it's safe, and this is what the studies say. And then the next conversation was like them coming back, "Thank you for listening to me that last time. I read this. What do you think?" And now it's my turn to communicate. You have to be patient. And that's kind of a part of building community. You have to nurture the relationships.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point around trust is super foundational to motivating people to change, motivating people to be open. And also, it's interesting because some of these topics, right, inherently people feel, especially if you have more expertise or knowledge, that you're approaching them from an elitist standpoint. So
Right.
what you're doing around saying, "Hey, I just want to listen," actually is very disarming.
It is, yeah. And disarming is great because people are kind of want to come at you with the pitchfork just because you've got the PhD sometimes, or they assume that you're going to talk down to them. And I'm like, no, I'm right here with you. I just happen to be a scientist, but that doesn't make you any less human than I am, and we can talk together.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, very powerful. Another question were, what experiences or transferable skills when you were teaching and working in education were most valuable to enhance your STEM communication? And what encouragement might you give to STEM students who are considering teaching or education, K through 12 or a higher education context?
Can you repeat that last part?
Yeah, it was a lot of cool stuff in
lot.
there. All right, let's go with part one. What experiences or transferable skills when you were teaching and working in education were most valuable to enhance your STEM communication?
Definitely patience, because I've been boots on the ground in every grade, K through 12, and every year through undergrad teaching. And patience is something that across the board, whether I'm in a classroom or whether I'm online or in an environment like this, it's something that's a muscle that I've really had to use heavily. And yeah, I mean, just patience of walking people through the scientific process and the knowledge acquisition process, I think is the top skill.
But shouldn't they have figured it out yesterday? How can you be patient? Shouldn't they have known? I'm being sarcastic.
Right now.
No, I agree. You're patient, but it's very hard to model patience. So, but that's powerful. So now, second part. So we get patience. What encouragement might you give STEM students who are considering teaching or education, either K through 12 or higher ed context?
Oh boy. Well, I have feelings about the education system. But I think I would also emphasize that there are many spaces to be an educator, whether it's the formal classroom environment or informal environments, like you could work in a museum. I actually learned today that apparently museums have, the American Museum of Natural History has a graduate study program or something. I heard that from the graduate students. I thought that was really interesting. But there's just so many contexts where you could learn and educate that I think that should be considered when you're imagining an education career. What do you actually want to do? Where do you want to serve? Who do you want to serve? How do you want to show up? Those are important questions to ask.
So sort of connected to that, thinking about the context and ways in which you continue to educate. And this goes back to something you talked about earlier around nurturing your curiosity and nurturing your natural interest in science. So someone said, I have a 12-year-old daughter who has shown a strong interest in science, but I can see the preteen influences already starting to compete with this interest. Do you have any advice on how to keep the spark alive?
Well, as someone who was also a preteen and interested in science, I would say, give your child room to explore everything. And it might be that your child is both a scientist and a dancer, and a painter and a firefighter. That might actually be something, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't pressure her to just be one thing. Definitely continue exposing them and nurturing that STEM interest, but also make room for you can do other things as well. And there's STEM everywhere. Like, for example, I went to Buffalo State and they have a fashion program, and they were using computer-aided design to design textiles, and they used a 3D scanner to take scans of people's bodies to, instead of taking measurements with tape, they were just scanning people's whole bodies and designing clothes on a 3D model, and that's STEM. And so, yeah, I think you have to expand what STEM really is, and getting your kid exposed to the full breadth of STEM careers is probably helpful too.
No, that's really good advice. Yeah, broadening what it is and continue to keep the curiosity alive. So, can you talk about your transition from graduate student to a professional? What has been the most challenging? What has been the most fun? Fun is important.
Ooh. Well, the most challenging, I think for me, was interesting. I felt sort of like an outlier in my program because I had worked in industry before I started my doctorate. And so, whereas a lot of my cohort just went straight through, they either went straight from a bachelor's to a PhD or, what have you. And so it was really interesting. I felt like I stuck out a little bit as far as my comfort level and who I was because I had been out in the real world before I started my PhD, and I had a really good sense of what I will and won't allow in my academic experience. And I was very much like probably the challenging student to work with because I was afraid to make my needs known, and I definitely pushed, the people who are tasked with supporting me to actually support me, and be a source of a resource. So yeah, I think that also gave me joy because I realized that it didn't take much to actually implement a positive change, and the challenge in showing up authentically and advocating for myself was also a joy because I saw that when I advocated for myself, policies were implemented, which then positively impacted my classmates. And so, yeah, I mean, that's honestly the transition. That's how the transition was from grad school to professional. I just kept that same energy after grad school. I don't think much hasn't changed. I've pretty much been the same person this whole time, just kind of pushing through. But overall, a positive experience.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the like some of the fun things you're working on right now?
Right now, so I actually just finished a engagement with Regeneron. I am an ambassador for their International Science and Engineering Fair this year, as well as their Science Talent Search. And they brought me into their DNA Learning Center, which they have on campus in partnership with the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. And they bring in inner city students to come into one of their labs. It's an education lab, and they learn introductory molecular biology techniques. And so they brought me in to teach the students the techniques. They had never been in like a real lab before, and I was teaching them how to do bacterial transformations, and we transformed E. coli to express GFP, and they were able to look under the black light to look at them glow. And it was just really cool. I get a lot of reward from that, and I think that touching on what we said earlier and talked about, that's kind of how I prefer to show up in education spaces. I love the informal learning environments. And I'm really excited to partner with companies like Regeneron who are really going the extra mile and providing an actual, like, tangible resource for students, and also they're really intentional on serving students that really need those resources. And so, yeah, that's really exciting to me, and having these interactions and being able to visit campuses like Princeton to connect with my audience and hear new ideas and grasp on all the innovative approaches in STEM has also been really cool. And I am working on a podcast that I can't quite talk about, but
you can talk about it. This is not a public event. There's not any recordings.
Right.
No, tell anybody about this.
But if you follow me on socials, you'll hear about it. I'm extremely excited about this opportunity. So, yeah, but I can't say nothing right now. So.
All right. When should we possibly expect it?
Early next year.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
We'll
to get
be
you out of that
waiting with
winter
bated
blues.
breath.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So last sort of advanced question was, someone said, I've been starting to get into science communication. Mostly I've been working on Twitter. I mean, we already said Twitter's hard. Come on, people. I don't know what the other media things are. So maybe Twitter's the best. But they said making short videos, but only my followers have seen them. All right, that's good. How do I reach the broadest audience possible? So I guess this person wants to be able to amplify what they're doing. See what I did there?
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. All right.
How do you reach broader audiences? Again, community. right? If your audience, if you've only built a community of 5 people, and not only that, they're not sharing your stuff, then where is it gonna go? I mean, I feel like that's how I grew my audience. And I mean, I would say sometimes it doesn't quite matter how many people are seeing it, but I think for me, the impact is not like in the analytics, but the qualitative data. So like I've made videos where only maybe 20 people saw it, but those 3 comments from college students saying, wow, thank you, this really helped me, like you gave me something to think about, that's what's most important to me. So I would kind of maybe say don't focus on the numbers, but focus on the actual impact. And I know numbers can demonstrate impact, but it doesn't show the full picture. So keep making content that you're passionate about, and I feel like naturally it'll reach who it needs to reach.
Yeah, I think it'll reach who it needs to reach is probably like a really good kind of idiom for us to think about. So wanted to see if there were any questions from the audience in the room. I think we got like 10 or 15 minutes for some audience questions.
And we've got a microphone, so let me know. Over there. Oh, competing.
Hurry!
You got it. Okay.
Hi, I really liked your story on the poster that you gave. Definitely, I think that took a lot of courage, especially as I'm sure everyone here has been an undergrad at some point doing research. What are your thoughts on how sort of poster presentations, general science presentations are changing nowadays to be more picture-focused and more sort of beginner-friendly, especially in the context of like you being denied the opportunity almost to like have something like that? And where do you sort of see the future of sort of inter-science communication going?
That's a great question. I would like to see a diversification in communication styles. For example, there's this competition called Dance Your PhD, where you can, I think it's a school that hosts this, but you could submit a video of you or your lab dancing, and your dance represents your research. And I think that's really cool. I've seen people do mural paintings representing their research. And of course, my brain goes straight to the creative arts, but I just think that we have to normalize other methods of communication to show what we know. That's where I would like to see it go, at least.
I'm going to give a special shout out to Princeton Research Day that happens on our own campus, and I actually think a lot of the ways in which our sort of early career researchers showcase videos and do other ways of showing their science is actually very impressive. So next Princeton Research Day, participate, see how people are doing awesome stuff, but I think that's another good model of just diversifying the communication of science and research. Right here.
Hi. I'm interested in the global questioning of science in general, and I think this is a huge problem. And I was just wondering if, from your perspective, if you could comment on how underrepresented or marginalized groups might think about science in general. Should we be more concerned that these groups are questioning science, period? And if you have some thoughts on how we could address that.
Yes. So in my experience, the challenge for many science communicators is being able to say, I don't know, or we don't know the answer to this yet. I think that when that happens, if we don't navigate that conversation of what the scientific process actually is, and that it involves us not knowing things, but it also involves us taking time to find it out, and that the answers and questions change over time. If we don't navigate that conversation with confidence, then that can disrupt trust. And you spoke about marginalized groups. You know, obviously the United States government has a questionable history when it comes to the treatment and health inequities that exist in marginalized communities. And so I think we just need to really perfect how we navigate uncertainty so that we can build trust. And I think, you know, again, it's okay to question science, but what are the conversations around that questioning, and what does that look like? Are we allowing people room to be skeptics? Are we being patient enough to provide that room? Are we being generous enough to offer our data, our perspectives, our time? It's really complex, but I think, of course, science communication is somewhere in the center of that issue. What do you think? I think that's a really cool question.
Yeah, I mean, I think partially it's you sort of answering this, right? We tend to be very ahistorical, especially in the U.S. around, why do people not trust science? Maybe it's because science is used against people to commit harm, right? Or maybe the roots of how things were started created harm. So whether it's obstetricians and gynecology, there's a lot of things that happen there. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment, right? So I think that's part of it. So acknowledging the history is really important for establishing trust. And then I think the point you said, I think a lot of people actually don't understand that science is always about questioning, and the answers are always changing. They're like, oh, you told me that this was a thing, and now you're changing it? No, that's the whole point.
Right.
I think people actually don't understand that, and we're always sort of looking for answers. So I think, to your point around normalizing that, sometimes we don't know the answers, or we don't know the answers. The answer we had is changing, is a part of the process, is really, really useful and helpful.
And then on top of that, what I like to do in these conversations is arm people with the resources to conduct their own research and look into it and say, we don't know what's going on, but you can look more into this here. You can read this, and not make it so that when I say I don't know, that there are no answers. I love deferring to other scientists who are actual subject matter experts in the field of concern. There's so many ways that we can build trust without having all the answers.
And the last thing I will say to add to your point around deferring to subject matter experts, it also is why it's helpful to have talent represented, right? The broadest talent represented, because inevitably people do trust people who they share some common identity with, right? So, I think that's also really important, right? So whether it's for a lot of people talking to their local physician around issues, but also seeing somebody who you trust and be like, all right, I sort of trust you. So I think that's also going to be really helpful in terms of communicating science, restoring trust, public trust in science and how important it is.
Thank you so much for coming. I really admire how you strive to be authentic in these kinds of scientific settings, especially because I recognize that some of them are dislike or maybe are even actively hostile towards these kinds of expressions of authenticity. And so my question, which is like a bit more personal, is how and where do you find the courage to be authentic?
I think that I'm really motivated by the joy that comes from within when I relinquish myself from these societal expectations. I mean, it's actually a weight lifted off of me, and I'm able to recognize what a better researcher I can be, what a better scientist I can be when I'm not so bogged down by these ideas and kept in these boxes. And who wouldn't want to feel comfortable in the skin that they're in? And I always just say, I don't think it should hurt anybody to be yourself, so why not do it? Again, that could make other people uncomfortable, but that's a them problem. They're going to have to confront whatever is within themselves that is prompting them to challenge you on who you want to be yourself. And so, yeah, I just find joy in it. It's a joy thing.
Got a question in the back. Get your steps in.
I liked the racing approach earlier. That was really entertaining.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this conversation. I do have a question about what the reaction of your PI was when you, after you presented that, as you described it, that pink, gaudy poster that was so extremely well received, and what impact it had on him, and are you still in touch? Was that a growth opportunity for him?
Oh, this is going to be funny. So I actually won an award for research excellence at that symposium. And it was because of my research. It wasn't a hottest poster award, it was because of the quality of my work. And so, oh my gosh, my chest was all the way out when I marched down to my advisor's office. I said, well, first of all, I went to the symposium, and also, here's my award. And I could tell that he was really beside himself, I think, and I could really see his thought process, like, oh, she went, she didn't tell me that she went, but also she has this award, and did she take that glittery poster? And I could see it all coming together. And so, but he's actually one of my favorite people ever, and he was just being protective over me. I actually wrote him a job recommendation letter the other day. So the tables have turned. He's doing really well, and we're still really good friends. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great talk. I mean, I'm just inspired.
Thank
not
you.
a scientist, but I work over at Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. And a question that I have that someone brought to my attention today is, yes, we need to diversify, but making it known when we do made this particular person feel incomplete, like they were not worthy to be in a particular school as a woman in science, because a mentor said to them, oh, we needed to diversify, and we need women, or we need a diverse set of students. I know that underrepresented is used a lot, but I want to change my language in a way, because it is about, diverse talent, diverse students. What do you say to those folks? Because that person, looking at them today in my office, I could see that they were, very hurt by that comment. Like, I didn't get into this school just for merit, it's because I'm a woman. So yes, we need to diversify, but what do we tell our mentors and supervisors and leadership what not to do?
Oh, that's oh my gosh, I almost want to defer to you, because I feel like I feel like we talked about this earlier a little bit. I think that challenging those words, and I think I've kind of mastered this a little bit in my graduate pursuits, not absorbing people's words immediately, because we can try to make a conscious decision to say, okay, those words were said. Am I going to internalize that, or am I going to take a moment to say, okay, that was said. I have the option to counter that. I have the option to question that, or make the person question themselves as to why did they say that. And I think that takes a lot of self-awareness. But when someone would say, oh, you know, we needed to diversify, we needed more Black students in the program, which is why you're here, I would say, well, why do you think that? You know, why don't we have Black students in the program? Why did they need to diversify? And like make people explain and do that introspective work to identify the root of what they're actually saying. I think that some people say things and they don't even realize that it's offensive. So walking them through that process, making them converse with themselves right there in front of you about why they said that, it has been helpful for me. And it also takes the burden of internalizing those comments off of me as well, because they're gonna process that, not me. But again, that's a lot of self-awareness. I hope that made sense. Okay, thank you.
Hello, and I have thoroughly enjoyed you in the conversation.
Thank you.
I think I might be one of the ones here from another level. I'm elementary. And what I want to share, I don't know if it's a question, but I want the statement to be said based on what the lady said there and her, and the lady in the back as well, is that images.
Yeah.
Because that's what I see with you, is the images. And what starts changing the whole dialogue and everything for our children and everybody to be anywhere is that they got to constantly see the images changed. And that's what you bring to the table, is that image, and that you bring intelligence. They didn't put you here, you didn't get anything because you were some statistic that needed to be made, right? And I think that's what we got to start saying to everyone, is all of us changing and being here and being those new images and still coming with, I'm talented, I'm smart, I'm just as good, my research is best, and all of that. And it's those things that our children need. Because if we don't get the elementary to see all of you and to see everyone, they're not going to want to go to the undergraduate level or move to the other level or move to the next level. So it's the imaging. So I want to thank you for being that positive image and communicator through all of that, because that's communication too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to share a story, a quick anecdote. I was at a university in West Virginia speaking, and there was an audience just like this, and there was a little girl who at the Q&A session came up to the microphone, a podium, and her mother actually had to hold her up so that she could reach. And she said, I just wanted to tell you that I didn't know that you could be a scientist and wear a pink dress. And I want to wear a pink dress and be a scientist too. And she told me, you know, how cool it was. And then she just walked off and went sat back down. But that's kind of another way, you know, showing up authentically. I don't ever see women wearing pink dresses giving science talks. I mean, sure, we're out here doing that, but images, again, normalizing diversity and how we present ourselves is so important. You just never know what resonates. I didn't think anything of putting on that pink dress that day other than I'm just getting dressed, but that little girl felt so comfortable and confident enough to march up here and say, I want to be a scientist because you're wearing a pink dress. I mean, it's the little things. It's important for sharing that.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I've been thinking about what you said about leaders, diverse leaders, and just like, hey, like, look at this, you know, like you're in these meetings with these like high up officials, and it's like, okay, like, look at this room, like y'all are asking for more diversity. Like, my question is, as more diverse leaders enter into these spaces, what do you think are the tangible sort of consequences of diverse leaders being in these spaces?
Yes, there are plenty of studies that study like organizational dynamics that support the importance of diversity in problem solving and just applying teamwork. And so I would just even point to the data and say the data shows the value of diversity. You know, scientists love data. The data supports a need for diversity. If we really want to improve academia and STEM culture, then we can look to the data and say, well, this is what we need to do to be better, to generate more robust decision making and to reach conclusions faster. And I just don't think it should be such a hard sell. But
Guy in the front.
I'm coming.
Wonderful talk today, by the way. You talked about a lot of themes today, one of which being images, one of which being representation, identity, authenticity. And so my question to you is, what are your thoughts on, being an artist, being a scientist, many things, and combining them together to think about, not just diversifying the image, but diversity of thought. So what are your comments on what the sciences need to do in education and higher education need to do in terms of diversifying thinking and not just the person or the face, but diversifying the brain?
Oh man, I think that it really starts early in education. I worked at a charter school. I was an administrator of STEM initiatives at Health Sciences Charter School in Buffalo, and I was tasked with rebuilding the curriculum and also building a bridge program. And one of the things that I incorporated was more interdisciplinary teaching, co-teaching. So for example, when we were studying, we were balancing equations, we brought in the math teacher to come and teach how to balance equations in the chemistry classroom. And they would co-teach that, and they'd be like, wait, isn't that Mrs. Barnes math? I'm like, yeah, she's co-teaching with Ms. Johnson, and like, there's math in chemistry too, and we're gonna team together and show that to you. Or when we were doing organic chemistry, we brought in the art teacher to model the molecular interactions and the movement of the electrons and things, and they made it into like an art project. And so like that, and also seeing the impact of that, seeing how the students just, they soak it up like a sponge. Like they crave these opportunities to get out of the box. And also they crave like the license to think differently, to have that independence, and to show their knowledge in different ways. Insert personal beef with standardized testing here. But yeah, I think it starts in K-12. I think it requires innovation, but I think that there's a desire for that, but I think admin also has to be flexible enough to help implement those opportunities too.
Yeah, I think to echo your point, right, that is the end goal, right? We want to diversity of thought. We want to think about the new ways of knowledge and truth seeking, right? And so there's overlays sometimes with identity, but also if you go to Prairie View, historically black college and university, it's not like everyone thinks the same, right? So so it's all about all of the ways in which our academic mission of teaching, research, and service can be fulfilled, and all of these things are key and critical. So I think we have time for one last question. It better be really good. Pressure, pressure, pressure.
No pressure.
I don't know if I should ask this question or not, but it's a difficult question, so I'm sorry. I think it's a really inspiring talk. Thank you so much for this conversation. But I guess I was really thinking hard about it. I guess on two levels, the obstacles, I guess, on personal level, at institutional level, and academia in general, of preventing, diversifying the voice, and even, to be honest, I would say even suppressing some voices. And one of the obstacles, I don't know if it's true or not, that makes me think of science communication could be a luxury in a way of thinking of financial insecurity in a way. So, and that's at all levels, from undergrad, graduate levels, postdocs. So I was thinking, for example, a single parent, we will never hear their voices because of, I don't know if this is true or not, correct me, but I was wondering what's your thoughts on what institutions could do, yeah.
Yes. So is the question, feel like people from marginalized backgrounds might not have the same opportunities to do science communication, and what can institutions do to support?
Yeah, I guess it's more of a honor question. I mean, I don't think there's an answer, but.
Oh. Well.
I would also about the role, for example, Princeton in this.
Yeah, so I think removal of institutional barriers is always key and important. And sometimes barriers exist because they were placed there, right? So we can think about all of the ways in which why historically black colleges and universities exist, because we didn't allow black people to attend universities. Why women's colleges exist, because we didn't. So we restricted the talent that was available to us to solve these grand challenges. So there's that. And then sometimes there's barriers that exist because the way things are designed, people aren't interrogating or questioning things. And so I think, some of the ways in which, Pablo and the Dean for Research Office thought about, hey, what does the research and literature tell us about barriers, and what are some interventions and things we can do to disrupt those barriers? And all of the things that, President Eisgruber asked all the cabinet officers to do were about institutional or systemic barriers that exist in their spheres of influence. So I think that's a model for kind of systems level change that I think a lot of institutions and organizations actually have deployed and utilized. And as always, we're always a work in progress. But part of it is thinking about how to identify things, diagnose, experiment, try things, and then refine. And so I think there's a lot of lessons learned. And so and we all do it together, as Dr. Baxter said, right? It's all about community. And again, we're not going to be able to continue to be excellent, to solve some of the grand challenges without allowing that to happen.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
So I have a gift for Dr. Baxter, but we can give her a round of applause for.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of awesome Princeton swag, but one of the things we wanted to present to you was this awesome personalized lab coat.
Thank you. My
so
goodness.
You could wear a pink dress underneath it,
100%.
Yeah.
I'm going to add rhinestones on here. It's going to be great. Thank you so much.
So thank you again for bringing your wisdom, knowledge to our campus, blessing us with some really good guidance and insights. And, for all of the meetings and time you spent with us today and that you're going to spend with our campus community tomorrow. And, we look forward to the podcast. We're going to follow you on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, I don't know, whatever. Yeah.
TikTok.
All of the socials. And so, let's give Dr. Baxter another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we'll be up here or down here, but yeah, feel free to come say hi. Thank you again.
This is so great. Okay, this is off. Wonderful.